It has now been a week since Election Day 2020. Election Day took place 7 days ago on November 3rd, 2020, but now it is November 10th, 2020. And for the presidential election, the winner was not decided until November 7th, which was this past Saturday, when it was finally declared that Joe Biden won the state of Pennsylvania, and the state of Pennsylvania gave him the electoral votes that he needed to cross the 270 vote threshold and win the presidency. So it took 4 days for the winner of that election to be decided, but in the end, Joe Biden won. And one of the reasons why, the biggest reason why Joe Biden won this election and not Donald Trump, was because Donald Trump has been at a relatively low approval rating for the past several months. And the number one reason for that is because of the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic consequences. Those two issues, they are basically wrapped together. They're highly connected with each other. You can't have a good economy until you fix the pandemic, and you're not going to fix the pandemic if people aren't economically stable, if they aren't financially stable. So the two issues are connected hand in hand. They go together pretty closely, and that is ultimately what decided the election. That's ultimately why Joe Biden won the election and not Donald Trump. Donald Trump, a lot of people thought, did not handle the COVID-19 crisis nor the economic crisis well. And because of that, they looked to Joe Biden to try to fix those issues that they were facing. So that is the main reason why Joe Biden won and not Donald Trump. There are also other smaller issues. Another reason why Joe Biden might have won and not Donald Trump was because of Donald Trump's divisive rhetoric in the weeks following the killing of George Floyd and all the national outrage that followed that killing. So that's also another reason why Biden might have won over Trump, but the main reason, the number one reason by far, is the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic implications. But this raises the question, if COVID-19 never happened, if the virus just never existed, would Trump have won re-election? And honestly, I think the answer to that question is yes, Trump would have won a second term if it weren't for COVID-19 and its economic consequences. And what I want to do in this video is, I want to show you guys what the electoral college map might have looked like for the 2020 presidential election if COVID never happened, because COVID-19 is ultimately what ruined Trump's chances of getting reelected. Trump was well on his way to getting a second term before COVID happened. In fact, I thought that Trump was going to get a second term for the presidency as late as this past January, when COVID-19 was only in China and the first case had not even yet been reported in the United States yet. So let's begin with that now. I would like to go on a state-by-state basis, talk about which states would have voted for Trump that currently in our timeline vote for Joe Biden. But first, let's fill in all the safe states, all the states that would have voted for Biden for sure or voted for Trump for sure. So all these northeastern states, with the exception of New Hampshire, I think they all would have definitely voted for Joe Biden. Anyway, by the way, we're still going to assume that the Democratic nominee would have been Joe Biden, even if in the alternate timeline it might have been someone else. I don't think COVID really impacted the Democratic primaries much. COVID-19 only started to make a major impact on the presidential race after the primaries ended. So for the sake of this video, we're just going to assume that the Democratic nominee is Joe Biden. And obviously the Republican nominee is Donald Trump. That doesn't change. But so the East Coast states are safe. West Coast states are also safe, like Washington, Oregon, California. Hawaii is also safe, as is Illinois. So Biden, Democrat, is at 182. Now for the safe states for Trump. These include Montana, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska excluding its 2nd district, Kansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, we already filled in Wyoming, Indiana, Missouri. So yeah, these are all the states, and Alaska, these are all the states that have consistently voted for either Democrats or Republicans in the past several election cycles. And these definitely would have all gone to Trump or Biden in the 2020 presidential election, even if COVID did not exist. Now we're going to get to the less safe states for either candidate, and we're going to get to the states that were more close between Trump and Biden. First, we're going to go to the states which I think would have voted the same way, meaning that the candidate that these states voted for in our current timeline, they would have voted for even if COVID-19 didn't exist. Meaning that even if COVID-19 never happened, I think Ohio and Iowa would have still voted for Donald Trump. And I also think that North Carolina and Florida would have still voted for Donald Trump. I know North Carolina hasn't been officially decided yet, but it looks like as of now that it's going to go for Donald Trump in our current timeline. And what this means is that if it's going for Donald Trump now, it would have easily gone for Donald Trump without COVID-19. North Carolina, Florida, both of them, Trump won in our current timeline, even with COVID-19. He would have definitely won them without COVID-19. North Carolina, Florida, those would have been won by Trump. And Texas, Texas was easily won by Trump as well, so he would have also won Texas without COVID-19. So Iowa, Ohio, those went to Trump by several percentage points, then they would have definitely gone to Trump without COVID. Donald Trump won all these states in 2016, so it's no surprise he would have won it again. He won them again anyway, even with the virus, but without the virus, he would have for sure won those states, no question about it. Now for some Democratic states. Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, even without COVID-19, even when Trump's re-election chances were better, I still think Biden would have safely won Colorado, New Mexico, and Virginia. No question about that. Those states voted for Clinton pretty easily, pretty comfortably in 2016. I think he would have done the same in 2020 without COVID-19. So Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, we got that. So I think the New Hampshire would have also voted for Joe Biden, even though it is a swing state, and even though it barely voted for Clinton in 2016, in the 2020 presidential election, the state of New Hampshire actually voted for Joe Biden pretty comfortably by several percentage points. And what I think that shows is that the state overall has gotten a bit more liberal in the past 4 years. So I think that because of that fact, New Hampshire would have still voted for Joe Biden even without the pandemic. So New Hampshire would have voted for Joe Biden, same with Maine. Both of these states are states that Joe Biden won by almost 10 percentage points, so even with Trump's re-election chances being much better, I think Joe Biden could have still pulled off a win in both New Hampshire and Maine. And then Joe Biden would have won the first district. That goes without saying. So now we've gotten to all the states which would be consistent with our current timeline. But now we're going to have to talk about the states that would have voted differently if there was no COVID-19 pandemic. The first state, and I think it's by far the most obvious one, is Georgia. Georgia would have definitely voted for Trump if there was no COVID-19 pandemic. Even in our current timeline, where there was a COVID-19 pandemic and that really lowered Trump's approval rating, Georgia still went to Joe Biden. And Joe Biden barely won the state of Georgia, but he still did win the state of Georgia. But I think that if you remove COVID-19, Trump's approval rating gets much better, and he would have easily won the state of Georgia. The only reason why Biden won that state was because Trump's approval rating was relatively low, so Joe Biden was able to pull off a surprise victory here. A victory that most people didn't expect. I certainly did not. I thought Georgia was a likely win for Trump. I thought there was a small chance Biden wins, but I was not really counting on it. But I guess Joe Biden won the state of Georgia, it looks like, unless the recount proves otherwise. But I think that without COVID-19, Trump would have easily won that state. Same with Arizona. I think that without COVID-19, with Trump's re-election chances going much better for him, he would have won Arizona as well. He won it in 2016, even though the state has gotten more liberal. I think that him doing relatively well for the economy before COVID-19, according to most people, would have been enough for him to win the state of Arizona. Now, Nevada, I'm actually kind of unsure of, but I honestly think the state would have voted for Donald Trump had it not been for COVID-19. Even in our current timeline, Nevada is only going to Joe Biden by a couple percentage points, which is kind of surprising, but keeping that in mind, if you take that fact that Joe Biden only won Nevada by around 2 percentage points, and then you add in the fact that COVID-19 wouldn't be there in the alternate timeline, I think that would be enough for Donald Trump to win the state of Nevada, if I'm being honest. The final states/regions are the congressional districts and the Rust Belt. First, we're just going to get the congressional districts out of the way. Maine second, Donald Trump would have definitely won. He won it in our current timeline, so he would have won it without COVID-19 easily. And then Nebraska second. This I'm kind of on the edge for, but I think Donald Trump would have won it without COVID. Now we finish on with the 4 Rust Belt states. So here's the thing. I honestly think that Trump would have done better in the 2020 presidential election without COVID than he would have done in the 2016 election. And that is because a lot of people approved of the way he was handling things like the economy and unemployment before COVID-19 came along. Obviously, COVID-19 ruined all of that. But before that, a lot of people actually approved of him, and his re-election chances were looking really good. To be honest, I thought Trump would easily get re-elected before COVID-19 happened. It just looked like Donald Trump had a much better chance of getting elected in the 2020 election than the Democratic nominee, which was undecided at the time. But once COVID came along, that all went out the window, like we all know. But there was this one study that actually looked at the primaries, and they predict the winner of the presidential election based on the performance in the primaries, and that study gave Donald Trump a 91% chance of winning the election because it only looked at the primaries, and the primaries happened in January and February and March of 2020 before the pandemic really started affecting the United States badly. But after the pandemic came along, everything changed, so that is why that model was not applicable to this election. But it's pretty interesting to show how much COVID-19 changed up everything. Getting back to the point of this video, I think Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania would have all gone for Trump in this scenario because they went for Trump 4 years ago. And I honestly think Minnesota would have followed along with them. Honestly, I can imagine Minnesota going for Donald Trump without COVID-19, without the economy being terrible. Because Minnesota barely voted for Clinton 4 years ago, and Minnesota almost followed the other Rust Belt states in voting for Donald Trump back then. So it is not unlikely that Minnesota would have also voted for Donald Trump if the COVID-19 pandemic didn't happen. This brings us to Donald Trump 322, Joe Biden 216. Donald Trump 322 electoral votes, Joe Biden 216, which means that Donald Trump would have won this presidential election pretty comfortably if it weren't for COVID-19 and the economy being terrible. And he would have won more electoral votes than 4 years ago in this scenario, which is pretty interesting because before COVID-19 came along, like I said, a lot of people approved of the way he was handling things like the economy. But ever since COVID-19 came along, a lot of people died from the virus. A lot more people were either evicted from their homes or lost their jobs or can't pay their bills. Everybody has been affected negatively in one way or another. Or I wouldn't say everyone, but most people have seriously been screwed over by this pandemic. There's no sugarcoating that fact. So Donald Trump 322 electoral votes, Joe Biden 216 electoral votes. Donald Trump would have won if COVID-19 never came along. At first, it seemed like COVID-19 would get over it would be over in a couple months, but kept getting worse and worse, and now we're at an all-time high in daily cases, unfortunately. And it's going to be like that for a few more months. I would say by maybe March of next year, it'll start to get a lot better, but till then, we're just going to have to deal with what we are currently facing, and we'll see how Joe Biden handles things.